Thank you for that. Wow. That and also thank you to everyone who's checking in. I see a lot of people already checking in from the East Coast. E. Casey Layden, Sayokia Kindness, watching from the Six Nations. I don't know how E. Casey Layden got to New York, but he's supposed to be in St. Augustine, Florida, holding it down. So good to see you getting around. Everybody else who messaged us and asked me why we weren't starting at 5 o'clock on the dot. Things shift around just a little bit, but thank you for holding it down with us. I do want to thank you all for checking in. Let us know where you're coming in from. The brother out there who checked in from Riverside, California, but is also Ocheti Shakoi, Lakota person way out there. And what you heard before we started here, if you remember, before every show, we're going to showcase an indigenous artist, and that is the drum group known as Bad Nation. Ta oyate wotakuye, hokau chasha iyuha, oyate shicha ichiab, ata kili, that's Bad Nation, and they're dope. So big thanks to them, way out of Fort Thompson, Crow Creek, Dakota Oyate. And just because they, yesterday they gave us permission to use that video, we did not get permission from the person who filmed it. And I looked all over YouTube, and most of our drum groups who are completely amazing usually aren't, filming themselves and promoting themselves. It's usually other people who are doing that. So please go to their YouTube channels, not only Bad Nation, but the guy who hosts that video, Mr. Phil Fox. And for Bad Nation, go to Amazon Music, iTunes, wherever you download and buy music, because like I said, a lot of what you find on YouTube isn't directly owned by the artist, and that's okay. I want to say thank you to Gerald Zephyr from Bad Nation. Thank you to Mayo One Arrow for putting me in contact with him. Mitakiapi, welcome everybody tuning in to the 13th episode of Cut to the Chase. As you know, this is a live show casting out to the universe from one of the centers of the multiverse or the indigiverse, the universe, the university of the universe, as Crow Dog says. And I'm coming at you tonight directly from the sacred Black Hills of the Republic of Lakota, sometimes called South Dakota, sometimes called Wyoming. And I've got a lineup for you tonight. First, we're going to be able to take a look at LandBack in action with respect to the Wiyot people. I've got two guests who are waiting to come on and share with you what's going on the West Coast, on the Woke Coast, and that is Michelle Vassel, who is Wiyot, and a very good friend, good ally of ours, David Cobb. And so I'm looking forward to them joining us. As you know, today is also Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples. It is a day recognized by the White House. It is a day recognized by the United States Congress and everybody out there who's on the ground doing this very important work. We want to highlight you. We want to say thank you. And so we'll do that as the second part of our show. We've also got word from those descended from the Alcatraz takeover. If you recall, that was 1969. It was sort of the beginning, part of the beginning of indigenous nationhood, indigenous empowerment. And we got a short video to show you about the move to create a proper monument for Alcatraz Island from an indigenous perspective. And then finally, at the end of the show, like last time, we got to do our weekly chores and take out the trash. So you'll have to stick around to find out who is going to be in the trash today. And they're kind of a usual suspect. I'll wait till we get to that segment. But tonight, we're going to go right into the guests. They are, again, Michelle Vassel from the Wiyot Tribal Nation. You can find them online at Wiyot, WIYOT.us. It's now referred to as Humboldt County. She's joined by David Cobb, who I first met at a Green Party convention, and they are both making moves on the northern Cali coast, which I long to visit again one day soon. I know we've all heard of the LandBack prophecy and movement, but it takes hard, practical work over time. And so before I bring David and Michelle on, I want to show you a video that kind of gives you a sense of what the Wiyot people have gone through in terms of LandBack.
Wiyot country. Nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, nahi nahi noa, e noa, e noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa, eh noa.
Wow, I want to thank Wingspan Media. That's who did that video, and we were able to find it. There are great things going on up in so-called Humboldt County, and I would like to bring on Michelle Vassler, and who's able to join us. Michelle, if you want to unmute yourself, I don't know if you've already done that. There you go. Now we can for sure hear you. We'll bring David on in a second. I just wanted to give you a chance to tell us what was going on in that video and about how you guys were able to reacquire your sacred lands.
So that was that video was taken in 2019, and that was actually a ceremony for the final 270 acres of Tuluat, also known as Indian Island, or also known as Gunther Island. Over time, it's had a few different names, but when it was returned back to us, we returned it back to the name Tuluat. So that was after a long history of the tribe's effort to return to the island. That island in the middle of Humboldt Bay is considered the center of the Wiyot world. It is literally the place where the creation story begins for Wiyot people, and it's a place that is, historically significant, religiously significant. It is literally, you know, where Wiyot people came from, but also the island is the location of a shell midden, which, as you may or may not know, is the buildup of human activity over the course of tens of thousands of years. So the Wiyot, the island is not only the place that Wiyot people come from, but also the island is made from the history of the Wiyot people being there. So it's very significant to the people. And for a very, very, very long time, 150 years, Wiyot people were not able to return to the island. There was a tragic massacre that happened in 1860 in February in the middle of a ceremony that extended over the course of many days. At the time, all of the men had left the island to replenish supplies, and it was only women and children and elders that were there. Some settlers from the Eureka area crept onto the island in the middle of the night and killed everybody in their sleep. And it was, you know, a really horrific event. The next morning, people in Eureka woke up and saw what had happened. And this particular event made world, or at least across the United States, history or in the newspapers, because we happened to have a reporter that was staying in Eureka for a short time that was from a San Francisco newspaper. So he witnessed that event, he published it, and then it went in the paper. They were actually calling Eureka at that time Murderville. But it was a horrible, horrible event, and there was a whole bunch of events that happened in sequence over the next few weeks that are lesser known, of similar massacres that happened in the middle of the night around here locally. But from that day forward, Wiyot people weren't allowed on the island. It went into private property owned by a gentleman with the last name Gunther. And, you know, for a very, 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 very long time, he lived there, and there were some other businesses that were on the island. One was a boat, a dry boat dock that basically a place to fix boats, and that operated for, I think it was 150 years on the island. In the meantime, Wiyot people have been trying to get back on the island. Not to say they didn't ever get on the island, but not legally. So in the early 1970s, one of our former tribal chairman, Albert James, reached out to the city of Eureka and tried to get a portion of the island that was city owned back. He approached the city, and the city was not ready at that time to restore the land to the Wiyot people. But that was a big event locally. There was a lot of attention in the media about it. But the tribe persisted over the course of, you know, many years. And then in the late 90s, our then tribal chairwoman, Cheryl Seidner, and her sister Leona, and two other non-Indian people that that live in Eureka. One was affiliated with a church group, one was affiliated with the Humboldt Historical Society. They got together and started a series of vigils that happened. There were vigils, candlelight vigils, that were basically, you know, supposed to be bringing people together to hold vigil for the people that were killed in the massacre, and asking for the return of the island. And I think that's really where the story for LandBack begins to really take shape locally, and things really starting to happen, because at those vigils, a lot of people came, and they might have been, you know, several hundred people that would come, and there were Native people, there were Wiyot people, there were, you know, other local Native people, Native people from around the area that, you know, their people are from elsewhere. But I think the significant piece too was a lot of non-Indians came out, a lot of people that were just local that really did not like that history, that, you know, the shushed history that nobody really wanted to talk about. So over the course of, I think those vigils lasted like 14 years, you know, more and more people were coming, and, you know, that really formed a group of people who wanted to do something different. In 2001, Cheryl Seidner approached our tribal council. There was a piece of private property that was up for sale. It was the place where the dry dock boatyard.
Right.
It was 1.5 acres. Half of it was in the mudflat. But she approached council and she asked if she could try to buy it. And the tribe has no economic development. We didn't have any money at the time, but that's when the fundraisers began. And Cheryl, sister Leona Wilkinson, drew up a logo, and we formed the Wiyot Sacred Site Fund. And for the next, little while, that's what we did all the time. We tabled everywhere we could table. We sold t-shirts, sweatshirts, pins, watches, you name it, we sold it. And we had some art auctions. We had a series of benefit concerts. The benefit concerts, I think, really also brought the community together. So we had a lot of well-known Native artists from across the country come, and a lot of people came out for those. A lot of local people also participated in helping with the play backup in the band, so that we could basically save money by bringing the big name stars out, and had some local people play backup for them. Anyway, over the course of about a year, the tribe was able to come up with the money to purchase that 1.5 acres and bought it. And at the time that the tribe was, first stepped foot on that piece of property, it was hazardous to humankind. It was considered environmental disaster site. It wasn't even, even if you don't include all of the chemicals and things that were left behind, there was just shards of metal that were all twisted and rusted. There were these big just chunks of pieces of wood everywhere. There were it's hard even to describe. The part of the island that the Shellman was on was eroding due to diking by the gentleman that had purchased the island. Gunther had tried to raise cows on the island, which is kind of silly because it has no fresh water source. But he tried, and so he was trying to dike it off so that the salt marshes would drain out. Well, as a result, he was eroding the midden. And so when the tribe arrived at that time, the midden was being shored up by a bunch of it was like a wall of marine batteries that were stacked on top of each other. It's hard to describe, but it was ugly. And so then as soon as we got on the island, we started the work to clean it up. And a lot of those early volunteers were the same people that were coming to the vigils. They were coming, they were helping us load wood, they were helping remove the scrap metal, they were doing all those different things. And the tribe asked for help from people, and people really came out. We needed things like a barge,
right,
because it's in the middle of the bay. We needed things like, a local company donated shells, because we needed shells for the shell midden as part of that restoration. And there was a lot of people that really came out, and it was really a positive thing. But as we were doing that work of the environmental restoration, which took, I think it was a total of it was like 14 years from beginning to finish of that. While we were doing all that work, the city was watching, and a lot of the shell midden work that we were doing, shoring that up, was actually on city-owned property. And so, our tribal chairwoman, Cheryl Seidner, reached out to the city of Eureka and asked again if they would return their city-owned portion of the island back to the tribe. And in 2004, the City Council of Eureka voted unanimously to return the 40 acres adjacent to our 1.5 acres back to the tribe. And so that was very, 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 very exciting day. And then skip forward a little while. we were able to do all the restoration work, and we received a Brownsville grant to do the soil remediation. That took a couple of years, and then once that was completed, they installed some monitoring wells, and we got a clean bill of health from the EPA that it was safe to be there now. And so that ceremony that was interrupted back in 1860 was completed by the tribe. And that was, 150 years later. It was a really amazing thing. So while that's happening, again, the city of Eureka is watching, and our tribal chairwoman reached, or at that time she wasn't chair anymore. She's our cultural liaison, and she was on council in another position. But she reached out to the city of Eureka again and asked for its return. And so the portion that we got in 2004 is immediately adjacent to the 1.5 acres we purchased on the north side of the island. On the south side of the island, the city owned another 270 acres. And that is what the video that you saw back in 2019, that is the return of that portion in 2019. Now, I want to make a clear distinction between the land that was returned in 2004 and the land that was returned in 2019, because the land that was returned in 2004 had a lot of things in the title the title was restricted. It said you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, and you better not do that. But they returned it to us with all these strings attached. With the land that was returned in 2019, there was no strings attached. We have clear title, which was amazing.
It sounds like you had to get the land. And if you're just tuning in, this is Michelle Vassler from the Wiyot Nation, the Wiyot Band, in what is now called Humboldt County, California. And they've gone through a long process to get land back in indigenous hands. And Michelle, from the way you're explaining it, sounds like you had to fight long and hard to get the land back, and then you had to clean it up, but you also needed the help of the locals in Humboldt County to build bridges. Now we have David Cobb waiting in the wings, so if we could get David onto the screen. We couldn't get his picture up, but everybody who's listening, if you could share this stream. This is a very important story about how LandBack actually happens. So I thank you all for tuning in from Alaska, from Hawaii, and from Ireland, and everywhere in between. Thank you so much for coming on to Cut to the Chase. And David is a good friend of ours. And David, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and kind of explain how you got into LandBack and what you see for the future in terms of this movement.
Gia Jewett, Chase, Michelle, and everyone else. I say Gia Jewett because that is Gaelic. It's a Gaelic greeting, and I see that we've got folk from Ireland here. And I use that language not because it is the language that I know to speak, but it is the language of my people when my people were living in right and sacred relationship on Mother Earth. And I start there to really honor and acknowledge the fact that there was a time when my ancestors were in right relation and were stewards of the land and understood that my ancestors did not own the land, but the land owned them, and there was the appropriate relationship. And then hundreds of years ago, my ancestors were terrorized and traumatized by the English Empire and driven off of their land. They came to this continent and then terrorized and traumatized a whole group of humans who were living in sacred right relation on this land. And that story, Chase, needs to be told honestly and not from a place of shame or guilt, but from a place of recognizing that there is trauma upon trauma upon trauma that can be healed. And the only way to heal it is by honestly talking about the hard history that Michelle did, but also then saying, what can we do together? Because the story of Tuluwat Island, and I'm sorry I'm getting emotional because just seeing Michelle's face and the work that we've done together is healing me, Chase. And I want to really anchor, this heals me. It puts me in right relation because I am an uninvited guest here in Jarajiji, also known as Eureka. Part of my decolonizing is understanding that Jarajiji means a good place to stop and rest because the indigenous people here named the locations based on its actual physical presence in the world. You see, I'm an uninvited guest here, but it is my pledge to Michelle, to Ted Hernandez, and to the Wiyot people that I can learn to conduct myself at least appropriately and be a welcomed guest. And that's what LandBack means to me. And I'll cut to the chase and tell you, not only has the city of Eureka now, because of the hard work of Michelle and Cheryl and Ted and everyone else, but now Michelle and I are creating an indigenous-led community land trust to buy land all over traditional Wiyot ancestral territory, and we are going to put that land in to the stewardship of the Wiyot people and engage in restoration ecology, cooperative economic ventures. We are going to heal this land while we heal each other and we heal this place.
David Cobb, of course, I call him a friend, and I was able to meet Michelle through David. And so Michelle, I know, like, taking land back, acquiring land back into indigenous hands is part of a prophecy. It's part of a movement, but also naming places and having indigenous peoples from what is now called California take their rightful place in how our stories are told, how our history is now known to our young people and to America's young people is important. Now, I want to ask you about McKinley. I know that something happened in Humboldt County having to do with the McKinley statue. Were you involved with that? How is the Wiyot Nation involved in interfacing with people of Humboldt County? Because I think in order to accomplish what you've done so far, you've had to build relationships with those who might identify as white or who know that they are descended from people who had a settler colonial beginning in this country. So I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on what happened with McKinley and how you're building relationships around your area.
So the McKinley statue was actually it was wonderful because it was done by the people. The people of the city of Eureka came together and they put a petition together and they went to their city council, the city of Arcata, which is within Wiyot ancestral territory. They went to the city of Arcata and they said, hey, we want the statue taken down. McKinley, the statue was originally purchased by a man, a local man who, I guess had the money to do so many, many years ago. But McKinley really doesn't have any history in Humboldt County. He really didn't have anything to do with Humboldt County at all. He did have some real practices during his time period as president that a lot of Native people are not happy with him for, including he had a lot to do with allotment. He had things to do with the state of Hawaii. So there's he had a negative history in Indian country, and a group of people in Arcata said, hey, let's take the statue down. They went to their city council, and city council originally voted to remove it. And then they had, there were some issues regarding, basically how it was going to be paid for. And then it went back out to the people of the city of Arcata and was put on as a ballot initiative, and the people of the city of Arcata voted to have it removed, and they did.
Sweet. David, I wanted to throw it back to you because I did not know about something called an honor tax. So if you could kind of elaborate on what Cooperation Humboldt is, how people can find you, and tell us about the honor tax.
Well, thank you, Chase. So the honor tax is a project of Cooperation Humboldt, but I want to take this opportunity to lift up the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Development. Chris Peters and Tia Oros Peters are the ones who imagined it, and it came out of a result of prayer and ceremony and thinking, and they were the ones who began it. And it began because although Chris and Tia are both Indigenous peoples, they're not Wiyot people, and yet their office, the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Development, is on Wiyot territory. And so they created the idea of an honor tax in order to acknowledge the sovereignty of the Wiyot people. And again, we all call it a tax. It's not a charitable gift. It is an acknowledgement that we are occupying unceded Wiyot territory when we are here. So again, to lift up the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Development for the concept and idea, and when Cooperation Humboldt from our inception made a commitment that we will pay 1% of our entire budget every year to the Wiyot people as an honor tax. And again, to recognize their sovereignty and to make visible the invisible. The Wiyot people are all around us here, but never talked about, or at least it wasn't whenever we were first formed. So we pay that honor tax and try to encourage other individuals and organizations to pay that tax to begin the conversation. And, you know, Chase, I'm old enough that I was a college student during the anti-apartheid movement and got involved in efforts for reparations for the descendants of enslaved people in this country. And in that fight, the action was always contact your congressperson to get them to support Representative Conyers' bill to just study reparations, right? Not even to pay it, just to study it. And I lived in the heart of a right-wing right-wing person's congressional district. And it always felt very disempowering to say, that's the ask. Here's again, to cut to the chase. So I don't have to wait for government action. I can pay an honor tax as an individual, as an organization. I can do it on my own to begin healing and reparations and make reparations for that history. And frankly, when Cooperation Humboldt first began, we made a point. Oh, and I should also say, you know, Michelle and I got to know each other through fighting off a corporate behemoth who wanted to come and defile a sacred site of the Wiyot people. And Cooperation Humboldt just showed up, right? And took direction from the Wiyot. And we beat that corporate monster back. And then when COVID hit, Michelle and I were literally unloading vans together, helping both of our communities help each other. And so all I'm getting at, Chase, is the authentic personal relationship that Michelle, Vassel, and David Cobb developed, and the organizational development between the Wiyot tribe and Cooperation Humboldt. And when we first began, we literally went to Ted Hernandez, the tribal chair, and Michelle Vassel, the tribal administrator, and requested a consultation to share what is our experiment to create solidarity economic framework here, to ask, again, not even their permission, because I'm here, right? I can't pretend as if I'm going to go away if they tell me to, but how can I be here correctly? And Michelle and Ted helped us learn how to be here correctly. So that's the story of Cooperation Humboldt and our engagement and involvement with the Wiyot people.
Thank you for that, David. Michelle, I want to recognize somebody tuned in named Rhonda Llewell from the Tuluwat area. So there are people that are listening in that they make the show. So if you're just tuning in, we're about to close a LandBack segment featuring the Wiyot Nation and also Cooperation Humboldt. Michelle Vassler is with the Wiyot Nation, the Wiyot people, the Wiyot tribe, and David Cobb is with Cooperation Humboldt. Now, Michelle, I want to give you the last word. So if you have any closing comments, sorry to keep you so long, but thank you for giving us the benefit of your thoughts and your inspirations.
So I just wanted to, my final thought, I guess, is that this is a story that is, it took generations to complete. And I think there's a real power in getting together and working together. David and I have done some work related to saving Wiyot, but also during the COVID time, getting to work and working elbow to elbow, doing something is where those real relationships are formed and how things get done in your community. And I just want people to, I guess, the moral of the story is keep going, keep doing it. It'll eventually happen if everybody does a little bit all the time. Mm-hmm. This story took generations, but it happened. And it's a story of hope.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. You're more than welcome. We'll catch up again. David Cobb is actually still on. So he wants to make a couple more comments, and then we'll close out this segment.
In 60 seconds, we've told you the story of what we have done in the past together. And now I'm telling you, Michelle and I are creating an Indigenous-led community land trust. It is an opportunity not only for philanthropic gifting, but also investing. So we are going to give people a chance to invest in healing themselves while they heal this place. Thank you, Chase. Thank you,
Thank
Michelle.
you both. Look forward to catching up. And thank you to those listening in. Annie 10K, Maitra or Maitri, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm getting all the comments. And Michelle and David are two very dear friends. I just met Michelle not too long ago. I was able to do a session with them sponsored by Humboldt State University. And I heard their story there for the first time. And I thought, we are all about land back, putting land back in Indigenous hands, putting land back in our lives, and really expanding the way that we perceive the word Indigenous. You heard straight from David, who's Irish, Gaelic, that those people who identify as white also descend from a place of indigeneity. And I know that tribal nations have an exclusive on indigeneity because it's an international legal term of art for Indigenous peoples and Indigenous nations. But throwing all that legalese to the side, it's important for us to create relationships with Mother Earth. And so I wanted to end there, and I'm going to pivot to today, May 5th, which has been declared a nationally recognized day of remembrance, of mourning, of honor, and recognition for missing and murdered Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. Raul Grijalva introduced legislation to properly recognize this day. Raul, again, Tio, Lekshi, uncle, he always shows up for Indigenous country, even with Oak Flat. I saw someone in the comment sections telling another person in the comment sections to go to save Oak Flat. And that's what this show is about. It's to get people talking, to get you guys an opportunity to hear these latest stories. I mean, unless the CNNs of the world are going to come and cover LandBack, we'll do it right here with your help. So I want to thank Raul Grijalva for doing that. The White House, Deb Haaland, has created that MMIW office and task force. And President Biden is also very close to her. They're in each other's periphery. And MMIW is just such a serious issue that the statistics are horrible. Indigenous women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other demographic. 10 times more likely to be murdered. Indigenous women are more than twice as likely to be the victim of a violent crime. 1 out of 3 Indigenous women alive will suffer sexual assault in their lifetimes. That I can't even fathom that. These stats are just coming from those who reported incidences to places like the Urban Indian Health Institute, which states that there are currently 5,700 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, but only 116 are placed on the Department of Justice missing persons list. Now, there's a wide array of reasons for how we got to this place. And people are starting to take notice. It's now widely recognized that MMIW is an epidemic, but it wasn't always this way. To kind of look into how MMIW formed, and really to have an Indigenous woman present and speak on that and be the authority on that, because there's certain things that I just don't understand about MMIW, about the female aspect, about the Indigenous women's experience. Lissa Yellowbird-Chase has come onto the show, and she's going to speak to MMIW. She was very busy. She was in Bismarck, North Dakota, but we were able to catch up with her. And so I wanted to roll what she has to say, please. It is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day, a day proclaimed by the White House, proclaimed by Congressman Raul Grijalva, and a day of recognition for MMIW. And I know that I followed your work before MMIW went mainstream, so to speak, before there was enough awareness, enough consciousness raised about this epidemic. I saw what you were doing with Sanish Scouts. And so I just want to thank you for coming on to Cut to the Chase. And I just wanted to start there. Like, if you could tell us a history of how you got involved in this cause, you know, for the benefit of our listeners, we'd really appreciate that.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me on your show on this special day for many. I've been doing missing persons cases really since about 2011, and one of my major cases that I started with was of a young oil field worker in the Bakken oil fields. And then, like we were talking before, Tanea and some of the people involved in MMIW on the Canadian side had a crossover event in Fargo, North Dakota. And we had a week-long event for awareness, and I had done a talk for them, like a quasi presentation, and also they had an earring exhibit, things like that. So it was kind of like the first all ever crossover event from that I know of from the United States, or from Canada to the United States. And it was there when people told me, like, yeah, you're looking for this young white male from the Bakken oil fields, but are you aware of what's going on with our people in Native Indian country? So that's what really opened my eyes. It really did. And so I started paying attention to some of our Indigenous cases. So kind of been working with that ever since, really. Just kind of fell into my lap. It wasn't something I really wanted to do, but I did see a need. And a lot of families, are still looking for their loved ones. So I do a lot of advocacy, try to be the fire under law enforcement's motivation to get things moving for a lot of families. And that's, kind of doing that ever since. So.
I remember now, I do remember this non-native brother who was missing and murdered, and I don't remember the year, but there's tragic circumstances surrounding that particular death. And I remember you being on the ground searching. So a lot of our listeners might not have heard of Sanish Scouts. And so can you kind of tell how that started and what you actually do there and what kind of cases you've dealt with in your work?
Sure. So what we originally started with was people that were going missing in the oil fields, because we knew that there was so many people and not enough law enforcement, and people's families did not have enough resources to come look for them. So that's kind of where we started. And as the oil field situation cooled down, started picking up more of our own Indigenous cases. One being that of Robin Fox, who went missing on Fort Berthold, right on the border there of the Bakken oil fields as well. And she was recovered, deceased, but that could have been, you know, that struck a really familiar nerve with our whole nation at MHA, because she was a fox as well. And I think that was an eye-opener for a lot of people, that something like that could happen in our own backyard. And so it basically, our work kind of spread by word of mouth. Once you get one case and people know that you've had a successful find, and when they get to a certain point, especially when they're losing hope that their loved one might not even be with us anymore. And I basically kind of pick up the slack when the immediate attention starts to wane. And that's when we'll come in and try and help the families out, and at the minimum, give them hope that somebody's looking, but we have had some success with that as well. And if I may, I would like to back up to what we were talking about earlier, Chase.
Yeah, of course, Lissa. Just this is you kind of feel free to direct this as you wish as well.
I really appreciate you said, you know, being that you're a man, that you didn't not feel that you didn't have right to talk about this issue, but I feel that was kind of in a roundabout way, acknowledging what I truly believe, and that is that this is a women's led movement. We are the life givers, and it's the grandmas and the aunties and the granddaughters and all those generations that are out there doing the looking, and it's the job, in my opinion, for our warriors to protect us while we were out there, you know, getting our people back. So I really, really appreciate you giving that respect to this movement. There's been, you know, some people come on to, and there's people out there that are willing to exploit this movement, and this is at the expense of our people. And so it's really good to be mindful, and it's nice to know that we have warriors out there like yourself that will acknowledge the kind of the dutiful kind of reasons of who does what in this movement as well.
It's a hard thing to deal with. I was raised by women, but I was not appreciative. I wasn't aware that I was being raised in rape culture, in European hetero patriarchy. Like, I didn't know that these were things that even I was going to have to deconstruct in my later life, just growing up as a young man. But Indigenous women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other demographic alive. Indigenous women are more than twice as likely to be the victim of a violent crime. 1 out of 3 Indigenous women will suffer sexual assaults in their lifetimes. And now these are stats that we were able to find out there. And these stats are only coming from those reported cases. Now, Lissa, you work directly next to the financial extractive industrial complex, the Bakken oil field. I mean, everything that goes down because of the Bakken, you know, it's not all good. I used to be a judge on your homelands for the MHA Nation, and I saw firsthand, you know, some of the harsh realities that come with that level of development. You know, all over the country, there's 5,700 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and people are starting to pay attention. You're right that there are people out there as well that are exploiting this epidemic because they have access to mainstream channels. Also, in the same line of thought, Deb Haaland has now created an office within the Department of the Interior, at least to track the data and to make sure that this is highlighted. President Biden is on board. Raul Grijalva, the congressman who is he is an ally of Indian country. But for me, I was going to, of course, recognize this day on our show, but I can't speak to it in any kind of authority. Like I've learned, because of who my wife is and because of how strong my daughters are, that part of my role is just to kind of step aside and let them lead. So that's just what I wanted to do with today. And your organization, Sanish Scouts, is on the front line of this struggle. So I just wanted to ask you if, what keeps driving you, and what are some of the hardest parts of the work that you do?
What drives me, and I actually thought about that earlier. I was getting ready to go do this talk over at the Capitol grounds, and I got some text messages where I've been acknowledged and appreciated on social media, and it's just like, wow, for people to think about me on this day was kind of, it was interesting, it made me feel good. So that's what keeps me going every time I get a thank you from a family member or a child. I want to remember one person in particular, Mariah Highhawk, which is down in your territory.
Yes.
Who it was assumed that she may have been a victim of homicide. Her mother, Arlene, just passed away last week, and her daughter, Matea, is now, left with just her grandfather. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is the reality of what our people are going through. So, I'm worried. Matea, she calls me auntie. I stop and see her every time I'm in the Rapid City area. We have these kids going through foster care programs that don't work. I was a foster parent myself. Some things went down with my foster kids that I don't even know if they're safe today. They're not with me anymore. And we have failed foster care systems. We have, and I just want to back up 1 second too. We do have all these statistics for women, but I want to make it clear as a frontliner, as the boots on the ground type of person, I know that our Native men are missing or murdered at least 1 to 3% more than our women. And more so than that, our children are being lost to foster care systems, juvenile delinquency centers, state industrial schools, mental health facilities, and none of these entities are legally obligated to report their missing status. Mm-hmm. That needs to change. Our Indian kids are being erased, and that's not acceptable.
You know what? You're right. We're under attack on all sides. Now, I know you've done tremendous work. You've probably done other media work. I had to hustle hard today to get you on the show because you're busy. What's going on in Bismarck? Like, what are you involved with there? And is there any particular video, documentary, or other work that you've been a part of that we could share on the show, just to kind of highlight what you've been up to?
Well, I got a lot of people that follow me. Like today, we are working on a Dateline. We have some of the family members for Olivia Lone Bear here telling their story. I wanted them to be acknowledged, and I want their story heard. They have not, they've received closure, but they haven't received justice. So they're down here to do an interview with Dateline. And then one of my own family members, who is MHA enrolled, but also from Standing Rock, Carla Yellowbird, who was also a murder victim. We did get justice in her case. And so those things you can find. Carla's case was kind of looked over, and we did a podcast with This American Life. It's called A Mess to Be Reckoned With, and that was basically a title about me and my person, because I was a hot mess when that case went through. And Yeah, I kind of misstated something while I was recording, and they ran with it. But a simple Google search and you'll find that I've worked with a lot of people. I am working on a documentary with a company, Chain Camera Pictures, that we've been working together for 2 years, I believe. And it looks that as though the book Yellowbird, which is basically one of the first major cases that I did, and that was with the young man from the Bakken oil fields, that is going to be turned into, they're doing a movie about that book. That book is called Yellowbird.
Okay, well, if I've gone over the time that I said that I'd keep you for, I think. But I just wanted to make sure that we have a woman authority speaking on MMIW. And I know because of where you live, where you're from, that you're in direct contact with man camps, with the extractive industry, and that MHA, because of Sanish Scouts, because of the blackface traditional societies and so forth, that you've kind of had to organize yourselves to keep safe. And so we definitely want to let our listeners know that this is Lissa Yellowbird-Chase. You can find her at Sanish Scouts. If you look just below her name, you'll know how to spell it. And she is a founder of the Sanish Scouts. And I appreciate you coming on, Lissa, and I want to wish you a good day. And thank you for always showing up and doing the work that you do. If there's anything you left out, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I would just like to say, Chase, I think we need to do some talk here soon, just to let you know that we do have an extreme problem going on down in Rapid City. I did go to Rapid City a few months ago to retrieve one of our tribal members out of that situation. I was harassed, detained, unlawfully incarcerated, and assaulted myself by some of the law enforcement parties while I was trying to rescue this person. And that's another thing that we should talk about sometime later, because there was a lot of wrongdoing, and it's so systemic. I was released 4 days after the fact with no charges. I do have a attorney squad that's on top of this right now. But these are the things that when people like myself are going to rescue our women from human trafficking situations or trap houses or wherever they're at, what are we going to do to keep us safe? I was put in jeopardy. We need to talk about that. We have problems, especially in Rapid City, and I do know law enforcement down there personally. They don't like me there, and we need to get this cleared up why they don't, because we need our women back, and we need them alive, and we need them safe.
You know what, Lissa,
I'd like to work with you on that.
I will look forward to making contact with you. I also know I never met Mariah's mother, Mariah Highhawk,
Oh,
who
I know.
of course is in Rapid City, but I know her father, Delbert. I was able to attend one of their actions, one of their vigils, just to meet who was involved, because I was looking for a place to plug in to the MIW epidemic in an appropriate way. So when you speak about Mariah and what's her daughter's name, Matea? Yes, I know who that is. I've seen her, the little girl, before. She's probably a little bigger now since I've seen her, but we want to definitely highlight Mariah and anybody else. I know Larissa Lonehill is still missing. There's a number of people who are still missing, and Sonny Red Bear, I know, is working on Rapid City Creek Patrol. Mark Tilson, other people who've Muffy, Mousseau, and
Alex
Felipe
Vasquez.
And there's
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so we should coordinate something on the ground, because Rapid City Police Department, they are a problem. They know that
problematic.
We've confronted them several times, and they need to be kind of coerced onto the table, because we are not only losing missing and murdered people, there's a lot of deaths along Rapid Creek. I'm in Mini Luzaha. I'm in Rapid City in the Black Hills. That's where the studio is, and so I know this creek very well. There's scores of people whose deaths who've been uninvestigated or just written off as, like what they did to Mariah.
Yes.
You know, just wrote her off and said that she died of exposure, and we know that that's not true, and that's because we're easy to ignore. So again, we will follow up, Lissa, but thank you so much for coming on, and we'll look forward to working with you soon.
Yes. Thank you, Chase. Keep up the good work.
That was Lissa, and thank you all for staying tuned in. We've come up a little more over an hour, I'd say, so I want to ask you to share the stream again. We also have a podcast. Sometimes we go about an hour and a half, and if you want to listen to the long-form version, just go to our podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts at, we host ours on Anchor, but that means you can listen to it wherever you listen at. And today is MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, MMIP, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples. It is a day to remember, and it's difficult. As a man, I could not speak with authority on this issue. As a man who grew up with toxic masculine indoctrination, as a man who was forced to confront my own inclinations, my own biases, my own complexes. That is the hardest thing for Indigenous men to do. One of the hardest, and that is part of our responsibility, part of how we can partake in helping to change the way things are, helping to confront domestic abuse, helping to change the way we behave ourselves, helping to not participate in what might be seen as locker room banter, or even letting the Me Too movement burn through whoever it's going to burn through, in analyzing the root causes of rape culture, of objectification, commodification, pornography culture, the hypersexualization by men of females, a dehumanizing process, fetishization, the exoticism that comes right from colonial patriarchy. You saw that in Pocahontas. You know, Disney makes a movie about Pocahontas, and nobody talks about how she was a 12-year-old child trafficking victim. So I want to take full responsibility for my actions and for my thought processes. There's a lot of unlearning and re-education that has to happen, not just in Indian country, but the world over. And these are things that we can do on our own. There are also things like jurisdictional challenges, the way that the federal government treats tribal nations as wards, as incompetents, as domestic dependent peoples. They deny to us the authority to assert jurisdiction over non-Indians who are committing crimes on reservations. And that is a completely racist way of viewing the law, but that is the law that we have inherited. So I want to thank Lissa Yellowbird-Chase. You can find her at Sanish Scouts. There are other organizations that I reached out to, and I was not able to get a guest from these organizations, but I was happy to get Lissa. These other organizations, it appears there are about 17 of them who were involved in Raul Grijalva's proclamation. One of them, and I don't know if they were involved there, but there's a few that I know people who work in them. One is MMIW, USA.org. One is Seeding Sovereignty. One is the Sovereign Bodies Institute, and Thrive Unlimited. I wanted to call special attention to those organizations who do this work. And I also want to thank again Lissa Yellowbird-Chase. There are people asking, how can we help? You know, those of us who don't live on the res or who are not directly proximate to this, find Sanish Scouts, look into those other organizations, and do your best to inform yourselves. But I wanted to end that segment there and pivot to a story about Alcatraz. It seems that there are descendants of those who sacrificed there in 1969, those who put it on the line and who made sure that what we have today was even possible. So there's a video that describes an effort of those descendants of the Red Power movement, of the National Indian Youth Council, of Richard Oakes, of the Bay Area. You know what I mean? All the indigenous peoples out there, United Tribes of all Indians, Indians of all tribes. No matter what the organization is, the storyline is the same, is that we are constantly seeking to reclaim our agency and tell the world what we are and who we are on our terms. So there is a video that I have been asked to share, and it's like 3 minutes long or something. So if you stick with us, I'll pop out on the other end of this video and we'll take out the trash. But for now, if we could bring on the Alcatraz video control.
Building a national indigenous teepee monument on Alcatraz. A teepee on Alcatraz. During the 19-month-long 1969 to 1971 occupation of Alcatraz, the teepee on the island became widely understood as a symbol of Native Americans. This monument is to be a permanent historical site, commemorating Native American struggles for recognition and self-determination. Alcatraz lies within the Ohlone ancestral lands. A teepee is not their indigenous dwelling, but at the time of occupation, Ohlones recognized it as a symbol of Native peoples. The site for the monument is important because it is where the teepee was originally erected. It is the only site where both sunrise and sunset are visible, requirements for ceremonial purposes. Furthermore, it will be seen around the Bay Area and visible to all passing ships. The legal right to erect the monument. The spirit and direction of the nation are founded upon and reflected in its historic heritage, the historical and cultural foundations of the nation, which should be preserved as a living part of our community life and development. The National Historic Preservation Act of 1996. Why it's important. The site is of historic national significance. In November 1969, indigenous tribes around the world were inspired by the Alcatraz occupation to claim their rights and to speak up for themselves. The Alcatraz occupation led to far-reaching federal legislation. 1972 Indian Education Act. 1973 ended the Indian Termination Act policies. 1975 Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. 1976 the Indian Health Improvement Act. 1978 Native American Religious Freedom Act. 1989 Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. Logistics. This is the site on Alcatraz where the teepee monument will be erected. The size is projected to be 22 feet in diameter. Interpretation. The story of occupation can be told through signage at the site. If desired, primary historical figures from the occupation could consult on development of an informed curriculum in printed and online park literature. Oral history recordings can also be provided and made available on site. Accessibility. The teepee will be a compelling symbol, highly visible to all visitors to the park and from across the bay, viewable from multiple areas within the park. Special needs and wheelchair visitors may view the teepee from existing viewing plaza. Visitors will be able to look inside the teepee. The teepee will be a cultural resource to natives under the Native American Religious Freedom Act. It's a part of America's story. It touched us all. This project benefits all. It provides the U.S. National Park Service with a dramatic enhancement for visitors to Alcatraz and the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. It's extremely low cost, low maintenance, easy construction, and accessible to all. It expands the narrative of America's heritage and creates a more inclusive story of all its inhabitants. It would be fitting and symbolic for ships from all over the world entering the Golden Gate to first see Indian land and thus be reminded of the true history of this nation. Richard Oakes, 1969. Dedicated to Richard Oakes and the movement he ignited.
Wow. Thank you for that video. To the folks that sent it to me who could not be on the show tonight. And I just like, we did a pretty good dive into the history of the American Indian movement, and Alcatraz predated those things. So for Indigenous history, it would do us all well to kind of learn about Alcatraz, what actually happened there. That led to the Trail of Broken Treaties, and it leads us to this present moment. It leads us to, everything, from the Oka crisis to Standing Rock, to the KXL struggle, to Line 3. It's Indigenous peoples standing up. So we will continue to bring you more on that about Alcatraz. But to close the show, and congratulations to everybody who made it here. Again, if you want to listen to the long form, just go to our podcast and you can listen to the whole show while you're driving, or while you're biking, or while you're riding shotgun, or you're hiking, or whatever it is that you do. But we have a segment called Taking Out the Trash. And this week we have a usual suspect. And her name is Governor Kristi Noem. She's the governor of the state of South Dakota. And I do apologize to those who, when we were already lacing into Kristi Noem last time, they said, bro, just stop giving your energy to that person. I do apologize. But she is a wellspring, a never-ending supply of hot, steaming trash vibes. She, if you remember, let me just try to go through a little checklist of things that she's done. She threatened the Lakota Nation after we put up safety checkpoints so that we could do contact tracing and survive COVID. And whenever we step out of the rusty little cage that they put us in, whenever we step out of our caste or our class, you'll notice that these forces combine to shove us back into that little prison. But when that happened, she tried to sick President Trump and the Department of Justice on the Lakota people to violate our borders. And it's true that she, along with many other settler colonizers, deny the reality of South Dakota's subordinate nature and other states' subordinate nature to the 1851 and 1868 treaties. And those treaties are extremely relevant. It is how we were able to provide a legal foundation to reclaim Alcatraz. And this will literally never end, this conflict, as long as colonizers don't appreciate their flawed approach to modern life in our country, a country that is evolving. Kristi Noem has blocked hemp in her own state, even though her own party and her entire state voted to legalize. She has blocked hemp. She has blocked cannabis development, even though her own party and everybody in this state told her to do otherwise. She's also fully in support of something called the 1776 Commission. Some of you may have heard about the 1776 Commission. It's essentially a colonizer's guide to denying other people's humanity and subscribing to this same outdated, obsolete cultural mythology of the discovering, conquering, brave pioneer who tamed the West. This is what the 1776 Commission is. It denies slavery. Literally, they deny their own reality, that we, again, are a politically, socially, and soon to be economically evolving country. Kristi Noem has signed on wholeheartedly to the 1776 Commission. Every time there's room for growth, room for justice efforts for the LGBTQ trans community in this state of South Dakota, in her state, which she is the governor of, she blocks that progress. And just recently, Kristi Noem had to have something to do. I didn't find anything that said Kristi Noem brought the American Stewards of Liberty to South Dakota, but there was recently a meeting hosted by the American Stewards of Liberty, and that is just another name for like the Americans for Prosperity or the Koch brothers or ALEC or the Federalist Society. I mean, all these guys could be pretty much lumped into one stagnant, obsolete demographic that belongs in a whole nother century and is not trying to allow us to evolve. They want to keep us in the past. As you know, President Biden has announced a 30 by 30 plan. That is 30% of the United States will be preserved by 2030. So this American Stewards of Liberty is a group that wants to uphold the current state of private property rule, the rule of property and capital in our country, which results in the kind of corporate sponsored, state executed violence like at the Dakota Access Pipeline. They are hard at work and we need to stay vigilant. Kristi Noem, I mean, there's too much for Kristi Noem. Like, we could just take out the trash on her probably every single week of the year. You remember a story about flights. She's using state-sponsored, taxpayer-funded flights, private jets that belong to the state of South Dakota, for all of her family to fly all over the country, apparently to promote this CPAC, quote-unquote, conservative agenda. I don't know why they get to call themselves conservative. They are obsolete. They are wasting our time. Kristi Noem is wasting our time and our tax dollars flying to who knows where. Corey Lewandowski knows where she's supposed to fly, though. And another recent item from Kristi Noem, weeks after telling refugees or potential immigrants that they are not welcome in South Dakota, she literally said, call me. I'm not going to take any of Biden's illegal aliens or Biden's refugees. Call me when they are American. And Remy Bald Eagle tweeted in a reply to her that went viral, wherein Remy Bald Eagle admonished her for such stupidity, being that she is an illegal alien on our homeland. She should be seeking a green card from the Ocheti Shakoi or the Sioux Nation. But recently, Noem ran that back and sang a different tune when it came to tourism. South Dakota is a state that relies on tourism. And so she was welcoming outsiders to South Dakota. The tourists, that is, she was extolling them to come and spend money on souvenirs, hotel rooms, and work in the state's tourism industry, which I also worked in the state's tourism industry for a number of years in my younger years. But Kristi Noem is saying things like, I think it's very clear we love people. When people travel to South Dakota, they feel welcome and appreciated. Apparently, that doesn't apply to everybody that she and her state actively discriminate against. That doesn't apply to people who think hemp should replace the petrochemical industry in all respects. And those are including people in this state who rely on agricultural economy. That is the number one producer in this state. Second is tourism. Her comments don't apply to those who have an evolving consciousness about cannabis and plant medicines. Everybody in this state who voted to legalize and decriminalize. Apparently, her welcome doesn't apply to those that her demographic have otherized. It doesn't apply to those who want to live without hate and racism. And finally, I have to tell you the story of last year, though. Last year, if you recall, Noem invited President Trump to come to Mount Rushmore to host a super spreader event and pollute the skyline, endanger the already high alert fire danger in the Black Hills with a fireworks show at Mount Rushmore. I don't know what it is with these guys in fireworks shows, but Trump, of course, allowed it. And this year, the National Park Service, Deb Haaland, and President Biden have denied Kristi Noem's request to host another fireworks show and by implication, another super spreader event. And Kristi Noem is suing. I mean, talk about a waste of space, a waste of resources, a waste of time, and a waste of money, taxpayer money. Mention again that she's vetoing all of this legislation and this forward movement concerning agricultural opportunities in hemp and cannabis. And it's high time that we take out the trash. And so I wanted to roll in a little video of Kristi Noem speaking just recently at Mount Rushmore.
Well, I'm very disappointed that we don't have the opportunity to host works here at Mount Rushmore this year. That is something that we did for many, many years, that we lost during the Obama administration, and they returned last year with an incredible event. It was an event that unified our country that I think all of us were proud to be a part of. We were denied our permits to host that event, so we have contracted with outside counsel, and we are in litigation efforts now to get our permitting process done. One thing I think everybody should know is that we already had a memorandum of agreement.
Oh, I cannot watch those without busting a gut. Yes, like obviously that is hot, steaming trash. That is a waste of time, space, and taxpayer dollars. And Kristi Noem is just pushing. She's trying to stay relevant either as a potential candidate for the presidency or the vice presidency of the United States. And she's up for election very soon in South Dakota. South Dakota is a place that we had to sue. You know, our flagship sponsor, the Lakota People Law Project, had to sue to make sure that all of South Dakota's state agencies are registering people to vote when they interface with those agencies, whether that's Department of Public Safety, Department of Social Services, low income home energy assistance, whatever it is, SNAP, what used to be AFDC, then TANF is now SNAP. Whenever people are interfacing with those agencies, they're supposed to make it easy for you to update your registration and to vote. The most basic aspect of our democratic lives is deliberately denied to those who they have otherized. That is why the 1776 Commission, that's why the Koch brothers, ALEC, CPAC, I mean, the usual suspects, like they are trying with all their might and all their lives as if their ability to oppress us depended on it, because it does. They want to deny that our country is changing, that we are now going to be able to tell the truth to each other, that there will be a conciliation, a reconciliation, a new social contract. They are trying their absolute damnedest to keep us in the 19th century. I would say the 20th century, but it's not even that. This is violent settler colonialism that makes a life out of fighting indigenous peoples, oppressing indigenous peoples, subjugating the working class, and making it difficult for us to enjoy our lives, making it difficult for us to smile. So every time we heal, every time we smile, every time we come through obstacles and challenges, we are doing our part to rise our nations collectively and as a whole. And I just want to thank the guests that came on. I want to send a last word of shout to those who are on the ground for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, Indigenous women, women as a whole. This day is special, and I want to thank you for sharing it with us. Again, share the stream if you weren't able to catch the live stream. If you want to watch again, go to Lakota People's Law Project, Last Real Indians. The easiest place to find Cut to the Chase is on Facebook at Chase Iron Eyes, Chase Alone Iron Eyes. There's nothing but Cut to the Chase on there. I do apologize for not posting more on there, but it's a place where you can go to watch these shows. And if you don't have time to watch because, you got other things going on or whatever, catch our podcast. We've got very big things planned for you, and we do want to recognize you and appreciate you for tuning in. I'm reading your comments as they come in, and today is May 5th, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day, Indigenous Peoples, and I want to just thank you and urge you to share and urge you to keep pushing, and whatever work you do, wherever you're at, do what you can to make a difference. And every Wednesday, we will see you here at 5 o'clock Mountain Time, 4 o'clock Pacific, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. So stay tuned. And this has been Cut to the Chase. Lila Wopila Tonka Ichichapalo. We are out.